What if I were to ask you a question? And what if I were to tell you that this question you are asked 10, 20, 30 times a day? But what if I were to also tell you that if you could answer this question honestly and authentically, it could change your life? Do you know what that question is? I'm sure you've guessed that that question is, how are you? And when we're asked that question, we say, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm all right. And we walk on. It's a ritual, it's a greeting. And my particular British stiff upper lip favourite is, I'm not too bad. I mean, what an answer, right? If we were in Germany, actually, we wouldn't ask that question of someone that we didn't know well, because it would be considered impolite. We would only ask that question if we expected an answer. So I'm going to help you answer this question and hopefully help change your life. Because we're very good at answering that question for our physical health, if we choose to. I've got a cold, I've got a stomach virus, I've got coronavirus, or something more serious, I've got cancer. There's no shame or stigma for doing that. Whereas with our mental health, the stigma prevents us from being more open, more honest. And I'm standing out here in beautiful nature on an amazing morning. You know what? Somebody once told me the sound of mental health is the exhale. My name is Rob Stephenson. I am a mental health campaigner, passionate about inspiring the creation of mentally healthier workplaces, societies. And this journey, this mission is personal to me because I am many things. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a CEO, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a cyclist, I'm a DJ. But I'm also bipolar. I experience bipolar disorder, which is a mental illness. It's a mental illness that is characterized by extremes of mood, from deep dark depression, where at its worst I cannot get out of bed, I cannot do my job, I cannot look after my children, through to periods of mania where I can take risks and make very bad decisions. But I also experience periods of drive, creativity and strength. And it's important we recognise the differences and the strength, the positives of our mental differences. So I was diagnosed with this condition when I was 30. When I was 31, I tried to end my life at a time where I felt a loss of hope and a sense of futility. But with the love of close friends and family around me and the ability to talk about how I'm feeling, I learned to manage my condition. Sure, therapy and medication have been helpful on this journey, but also building up the self-awareness of what is driving my mental well-being has been crucial in my route to survival and to thriving. So answering that question of oneself is super important. And it's also important for all of us, because one in one of us have mental health. It is one of the most beautiful things about being human. We all have it. It is complex. But if we have it, we can accept that we can influence it. We're all on this continuum. We oscillate from thriving through to struggling, daily, hourly. But that knowledge brings power, because then we can make micro steps to tweak where we are on that continuum. And if the pandemic has shown us anything, it has shown us that 100% of us will struggle with our mental health from time to time. So if we can talk about it, we can influence it. And with influencing becomes greater happiness and productivity as we become flourishing more of the time. So let's get back to the question. And let's change the emphasis, let's change the narrative. Rather than how are you, let's say, how are you today? If we say today, that brings a of immediacy to the question. It implies that today might be different to yesterday, to reflect the fact that our mental health is always changing, like our physical health and fitness is. But it also implies that the person asking the question might be available to listen, might be expecting an answer. So let's try and answer that question of ourselves in a very light and curious way by reflecting on what might be driving our mental well-being. How well did you sleep last night? Have you exercised well recently? Is your nutrition balanced? And are you eating a range of good foods? Is your alcohol in check? Are you getting good nutrients? What is your sense of purpose like? Do you know what your why is, and has that changed recently? Importantly, in current times, how well are you balancing the natural stresses of our lives, our work, our studies, with periods of recovery, with mindful moments, with time away from our computers, with time focused on our families, with time focused on ourselves? Are you helping others? Helping others is great for our own well-being. And what about your finances? Do you feel relaxed about your finances right now? There are many drivers of our well-being. Those are a few of them. And just reflect in a light and curious way as to how they apply to you. And think, what is my well-being score out of 10? Where 6 is average, 5 is low, 4 is very low, and then 3, 2, 1 we're into struggling and might need some professional help. But 7 is good, 8 is very good, 9 is exceptional, and 10 is lifetime peak form, where all of the stars align, everything is in balance, and it's the perfect day for you. So what is your score? And the out of 10 bit is important because it changes the language we can use to communicate with how we're feeling. And this is good for ourselves because self-awareness then brings the ability to really tweak what we're doing, to change the way we're sleeping, to prioritize exercise, to take those breaks in the day, to try and move that score upwards or maintain a good score. But in communicating with others, that language is also very important because it's much easier to say, I'm a 4 out of 10 today, rather than I'm experiencing anxiety or depression, or I'm feeling very, very isolated. It breaks down that stigma and normalizes the conversation. And I think if we can share how we're feeling, if we can answer that question, how are you today, we can create a type of herd immunity for mental illness, because we're creating these circles of support in our friend groups, our families, our workplaces, our communities, all from answering that question. And workplaces, I think, can pay attention to this. If you are a leader of a workplace, you should be asking this question of your employees in respect of their mental health. Because we've removed those natural support mechanisms to be physically distant and safe, those social connections we need as human beings. I hate the word social distancing, by the way. I actually lobbied to get this changed because we need to be physically distant to be safe from the coronavirus, but we need to be socially connected to be well. So workplaces need to be asking that question, and if leaders of workplaces are not asking their people how they're doing, I think you need to question whether you are truly a leader right now. The same applies to governments. As we look to build back better, is economic growth and gross domestic product a really useful measure of the success of doing that? Or should we be looking at the well-being of our citizens as a more appropriate measure? Some countries do this, Scotland, New Zealand. So I think asking that question of our nations, of our workers, of our employees, and of ourselves can have a big difference. And I'd like to just share a story with you and some advice from my 6-year-old daughter. Because a few years ago, Gabby, age 6, I decided I needed to talk to my children about my mental illness because I was talking to the world at large about it. So I sat Gabby down and I said, let's have a chat about mental health. And if you look carefully on the picture, you can see she's put a little L above the M. She was more concerned about the health of our lentils, our lentil health. So I said, Gabby, how do we look after our lentil health? And she said, no accidents, Daddy. Wear your helmet on your bike and think a lot, use your brain. Which sometimes is not the right answer if we're feeling anxiety and if we're ruminating, but good advice, literal advice from a 6-year-old. So I said to Gabby, I'm going to ask you a more specific question. If you woke up one day and you didn't feel yourself, you were sad, you didn't want to get out of bed, you didn't want to play, what would you do? And Gabby looked at me like I was asking the most obvious question in the world. She said, Daddy, I would find someone who I love and I would tell them, I would talk. Find someone who you love and tell them, talk. And then I said to Gabby, if you went to school one day, and these were the beautiful days when one could send their children to school, and you saw a friend sitting off to the side, not playing like they would normally do, looking really sad, looking reserved, what would you do? And Gabby looked at me like I was a complete and utter idiot. She said, Daddy, I would go over and I would ask if they're okay. I would see if they're okay. So 2 things we overcomplicate as adults and societies. If we're struggling with our own mental well-being, find someone to talk to, find someone you love, someone you trust, and talk, because talking is the start of the journey towards recovery. But importantly, in our workplaces, in our communities, in our friend groups, in our families, if we see those signs of behaviour change, and we have to look a bit harder right now, but if we see them, go over and ask that person, how are you today? And you might need to ask them twice because of the stigma that question brings. Because we can really create this support, this herd immunity for mental illness that I mentioned, if we take the time to ask people we care about how we're doing. So, we stand at a junction in time. Are we going to go this way, or are we going to go this way? Over here is a more hopeful world. Over here is where we were before. But it starts for me with this question, asking this question and answering it honestly and authentically. So let me tell you how I am today as I record this in this amazing setting. I'm a 9 out of 10. I'm on exceptional form. My mood is exceptional. But if we were in a theatre right now and I was standing on that red dot presenting to you on a stage, which I would love to be doing right now, I would love to be doing that, I would pause and give you the gift of a few minutes to reflect on how you're doing, answer that question, and share your score with the person next to you, and share as much or as little as what is driving that score. And we would watch the magic happen, the magic of human connection. Now, we can't do that directly today, but we can recreate that magic. So after this talk, when you've got some space, I invite you to contact somebody you care about and ask them the question and share your score with them and invite them to do the same and have a chat about it. And I promise you, doing that will change your life. So, thank you for listening to me today. And how are you today?